Okay, so it is 7:05, so I'll get started now. And I guess before I officially start the presentation, I'd like to give a brief introduction of myself if you guys didn't read the bio already. And it's that my name is Eva, and I just graduated from Princeton High School this, I guess, a month ago in June. And in the fall, I will be attending UT Austin as a chemistry major, and I was part of the IESO, so the International Earth Science Olympiad team in 2020, so last year. So I was the one of the top 8 students that were selected to represent the US on the international level. So um, just as a preface, I would like to read this land acknowledgement, which says, I, Eva Zhu, respect and acknowledge the Lenape people as the traditional custodians of the land I currently live on. So the reason that I start my presentation with this is because as an earth scientist, I find it really important that I respect and I acknowledge the land that I study. So like the earth and everything belongs in New Jersey, where I live in Cranberry, used to belong or belongs to the Lenape tribe. So I'm just acknowledging their presence. And yeah. So as an overview of this presentation, I'll first go over what the USC Esl is, the leadership, a little bit of the structure, and then I'll go over the selection process. So how you can take the open exam, get into camp, and then potentially get onto the team. And I'll also be talking about this junior camp, which is actually a bridge into the senior camp, and then some studying tips or resources that you might find useful if you, I guess, take the open exam one day. So number 1, which is the USC Esl, and this is our logo of an earth. And yeah, you might notice that on this slide, I call it the United States Earth Science Organization. And the reason that we're not called the United States Earth Science Olympiad is because there's actually a copyright to use the word Olympiad in our name. And right now we're actually trying to like figure out that process so that we can officially have Olympiad as a part of our name. But our director as of now is Mr. Taylor, Mr. Thomas Taylor, and he's a director of operations. And then we have our assistant director, whose name is Chelsea Brunner-Born. And it's actually a little confusing right now because Mr. Taylor is planning to get more involved on the international level. So we're in the process of handing Chelsea the official director position. And we're kind of going through a little bit of change right now. So there's a little bit of like it's not super clear who's the director as of now, but yeah. Sorry, that was like worded very badly. But yeah, so another, I guess, piece of information that I think is useful is to compare the USC Esl with other Olympiads. So as of now, the USC Esl is relatively small, and we're a program that's still developing, and this means that it's prone to change because I guess more well-known Olympiads such as math or chemistry or physics, they were created in like 1960s, 1970s. So they've been around for a lot longer. So they have more established programs. And the USC Esl was only created in 2007. So we're only 14 years old today. And another difference is that the USC Esl generally has less available resources. And what I mean by that isn't that this program is worse. It's just that earth science, as you guys probably know, isn't integrated into like the public school system. So there's not a dedicated earth science class usually, unlike like biology, math, or physics. Those Olympiads, you probably start learning about like math in, kindergarten. So it's a lot easier to get into those, like expose yourself to those Olympiads. And for earth science, it's actually a little harder because a lot of the beginner resources that you might encounter are just college level textbooks. So if you want to study for the Usc Esl, it can be a little bit difficult in that regards. And another thing that's really special about the Usc Esl or the IESO is that it's one of 3 international Olympiads to have a team competition, which means that although you do compete by yourself to get like gold medals or silver medals or medals in general, you also have a team component where you need to work together to get a score. So if you look on the other hand, you might have something like the Math International Olympiad, which is you have a team of 4 people, but those 4 people compete individually only. So there's no team component. And the 2 other Olympiads that have a team component are the Linguistics Olympiad and the Astronomy and Astrophysics Olympiad. So those are just some things about it. And also, since I mentioned that our program is prone to change, since it's so small and it's still developing, all this information that I'm giving you today is what I experienced and what it has been in the past. So if you're going into this process, I guess more than 2 to 3 years later, I am not sure how similar it will be, since we are going through some like exam rewrites and things like that. So now I'll go into the selection process. So the first step to this is taking an open exam. And what this means is anyone can take it. You have to, as of now, you have to pay a fee to take it, and you have to take it at your school. So you ask a teacher to proctor you, and you'll just take the exam at school. And in the past years, it has been multiple choice and open-ended. So they might ask you for some short response and some long response. And this open exam selects a top 30 scorers. So if you make it into the top 30, you get to go to camp, which is the training camp to select the people for the team. And it's usually a week-long program at the University of Vermont. When I did camp, it was not at the University of Vermont because of COVID. So our camp was just online. And at camp, you'll have daily quizzes. They'll test you on rock and mineral ID. So they'll like show you, well, if you're in person, they'll give you little rocks, and then you have to say what they are, and then they'll have written exams too. And this usually takes place in early July. And another part of the training camp is something called an ESP, or an Earth Systems Project. And what this does, since I mentioned earlier that at the IESO, the international competition, you need to work with a team. What this ESP does is it kind of tests you in that regard to see how well you work with other people. So you need to do well on your quizzes, but you also need to make sure you like work well with other people, because that is also part of the selection criteria. Yeah. And then after camp, we'll take a look at your scores. I think there are usually 5 quizzes. So your 5 quizzes and then your ESP, and then the top 8 scoring students are the people that make it onto the team that represents the US. And there's the top 4 are the people that are the ones who compete individually. And then the people that score from 5th place to 8th place are the people that work together in the field to do the team component. So they're almost like 2 teams, but you represent the US together. And the international competition is usually in August. And yeah, I think that's it. And then there's also the junior camp, which I mentioned earlier. And it's a bridge to senior camp, but it is only for girls. And the reason this is to address something called the Leaky Pipeline. And what this is that as girls progress through higher education, so like a bachelor's, a master's, and a PhD, there seems to be a drop off. So not as many girls go on to get a PhD than boys in general. So what the junior camp does or attempts to do is to address this by exposing girls to geosciences earlier on to, I guess, nurture an interest. And this is a quote from the Swiss Journal of Geosciences, is that the leaky pipeline is particularly accentuated in STEM disciplines, with geosciences representing the least diverse of all. So what we're trying to do with junior camp is to address this leaky pipeline. And in junior camp, it's basically set up the same thing as regular camp. You also need to do the ESP, except there are no quizzes. It's just more teaching. It's just teaching and then an ESP. And also in comparison to senior camp is that junior camp, you do not need to take an open exam. So if you're a girl or you identify as a female, you can participate in junior camp and it will hopefully prepare you for senior camp. And actually one of the people on the team this year graduated from, was a graduate of the junior camp and she made it on the team. So this is like a good resource if you're looking for one to make it onto the senior camp. So you can be selected into the team. And yeah, and then now it's the final section, which is studying tips and resources. So another preface is that these things I'm going to mention right now are just my recommendations. By no means does this, if you follow this, it does not mean you're going to make it into the team, nor does it mean you'll make it into the camp. It's just suggestions that I think are really useful in studying. And the first one is Science Olympiad. So I assume most of you guys are in middle school at least. So I think Science Olympiad is a super good resource that you guys can use to study for the Usc Esl. And the specific events that I'm pointing to are rocks and minerals, dynamic planet, geomapping, and fossils. Yeah, those are all the earth science events because, as I said, at camp, they will definitely test you on your ability to identify rocks and minerals. So if you guys already do rocks and minerals in Science Olympiad, that's definitely a plus. And if you look at the Science Olympiad rocks and minerals list, that is a very good starting point. And I emphasize starting point for things that you should study. And Dynamic Planet is also very good. I know Dynamic Planet definitely rotates through topics, so like plate tectonics or oceanography and such. But yeah, Dynamic Planet I highly suggest. Fossils, it's not super high on the priority list. It can help you, but it's definitely not as helpful as rocks and minerals and Dynamic Planet. And then my second tip is find a purpose for why you're studying. And why I say this is because I mentioned it earlier, is that earth science is not commonly taught at school. So if you go out of your way to study and try to do Usc Esl, you're going to need a very strong reason why, because you're dedicating extra time to extra time to study something that you're really not familiar with. So find a purpose as to why you want to do it to keep yourself going. And another reason I say this is I know a lot of people that make it into camp. So they make it into top 30 by cramming. They just read a textbook and they can make it into camp. But if you truly want to make it onto the team, it's really hard to do that if, I don't know, you think that Usc Esl is a small Olympiad and it's easier to get in, because that's not necessarily the case. Because although there are less people taking the test, it does not necessarily mean it's easier, because all the people that are taking the test have gone out of their way, right? Gone out of their way to read these college level textbooks and gone out of their way to study something that is kind of obscure. So the pool of people that you're putting yourself into is already a notch higher. So like, I know some people might take the biology Olympiad and maybe they just had freshman year biology and then they just take a shot at it. So even though your applicant pool or the pool that you're competing against is smaller, they are most of the people are pretty passionate about why they want to study earth science. So yeah, find a reason and know why you want to study earth science. And it's also because a common trait I find in the top eight, is that they're also very involved in their local community. So they can be climate activism, or they do research, or they're very actively involved in making the earth a better place. And they're not just solely like studying for the Earth Science Olympiad. And then my last tip is being well-rounded and specialized. And the reason I say this is because Earth is a system. Earth isn't only just the ocean or just rocks or just the atmosphere. It all really works together to create like a really balanced place. So that's why in the Earth Science Olympiad, or when you're studying for it, or when you're being quizzed during camp, it is essential that you understand how things work together. So if it rains a lot, what happens to the ocean? And then how does the ocean's changes affect the fish that live in it? So you really need to understand how everything works together, but you also need to be specialized, because a lot of everyone has like their own specialty. I think my specialty is probably IDing rocks and minerals. So I'd say I'm okay at that. I'm relatively good at that. So that makes me special, and that gives me a unique, I guess, selling point in the team. And yeah, so just find something that you really like. If you really like the ocean, then dive deeper in that. So yeah, my last tip is definitely being well-rounded and specialized. So you definitely need to know all the spheres, so like the geosphere or the hydrosphere, but you also definitely need to have something that makes you like unique and special so that you can contribute to the team. Yeah, cool. And that is it. And if you want more information, this is the website for the United States Earth Science Organization. And there they have past exams. So if you want to look at the things that prior students have taken at camp and such, or any tips, because I know Ben Choi, he competed a couple years ago and he wrote this guide towards with like textbooks that you should read, or websites you can visit to study. You can find it on this website. And the reason why I am not outrightly giving you guys the textbooks is because I believe that the first step in studying is being able to help yourself. So if I just tell you how to do everything, that's not useful for you in the long run. I will, if you have any questions, I will point you in the right direction. So I think that this website is a good place to start, but I definitely will not just tell you things that you should do, because if you do want to make it far and you do want to make it into the team, it is essential that you know how to study by yourself and find resources. But yeah, and that is it. So thanks for listening to my short presentation, and I'll be taking questions now. Cool. Oh, I see someone chatted, direct message me saying, could you please recommend the books? So as I just said, I'll type the website into the chat, and you can definitely go on the website and read Ben's guide to the textbooks you should read. Oh, well, yes, you should read. And yeah, you can go from there. So when will be the right time to start this? Any prerequisite knowledge? So as with any science Olympiad, you definitely need to know your stuff. I do not recommend just going in and taking the exam. Obviously, you wouldn't take the math Olympiad trial exam without knowing any math. It's the same thing applies for this. I definitely see all the information I gave today is what I have also just heard from my friends, because in comparison to other people, I think I have a relatively unique story or path as to how I got where I got. So um, I started studying when I was probably in 5th grade out of pure interest. So um, I didn't start because of Science Olympiad. I didn't start because of any of that. I just kind of liked the earth a lot and I just started studying. And it's actually, for me, it's been a long-term accumulation of knowledge. So I've actually never finished a single textbook. So I personally cannot recommend any. You can read Ben's guide, as I said earlier, for recommendations. So with that said, there are a lot of different paths. There's no specific formula to get into the team, and you can do it my way. You can start when you're 5th grade and just slowly every day look at a few things, and then by the time you're in high school, you have a breadth of knowledge. Or you can also start in middle school with Science Olympiad and just start studying that way. Any prerequisite knowledge, I would say you should, the student should, actually, no, you can take the open exam anytime you want, but I would suggest at least knowing, I don't even know what to say for that. I don't want to bar anyone. It's just, if you think you studied enough, take a shot at it and take the open exam, I would say. Any age requirement for junior camp? Most junior camp attendees are in 7th or 8th grade, but you can go up until 10th grade. And there's sometimes even exceptions to that with students in 10th, going into 11th grade. So the purpose of junior camp is really just to promote earth science education for girls. So if your student or the student is interested in it, I am sure that the USC Esl would love for them to be a part of that. And how many students roughly take the open test in recent years? I would say 200 plus. So it's definitely a small pool in comparison to like all the other Olympiads. But this absolutely does not mean it is easy, because it is actually well known that at camp, so at the training camp, the tests that the students are given, the campers are given, are much harder than the IESO. This is why the US also regularly takes home gold medals, because of how prepared we are. Is it easy to find a teacher in your school to proctor the exam for you? So during COVID, it was a little different. I just had to record myself with my desk in my testing environment, and then teacher also had to watch me. But usually you'll just find a teacher. So you ask a teacher that you're familiar with, and you're like, oh, are you willing to sit with me for around like 3 hours? It's a very long test. We might make it shorter, but that's not a guarantee. You'll find a teacher. And after you take the exam, you will need to get the signature of your teacher and the signature of your principal, verifying and certifying that you didn't cheat or gain any unfair advantage. So as long as you have a teacher that is willing to proctor you, you just have to send their information to the USC Esl when you register for the test, and it should be okay. Do you have to study elements and things like that? Do you mean like the periodic table of elements? If you know, so the answer to that is no. Definitely certain minerals have certain elements that are very useful. So you will need to know things like, I don't know, bauxite is the ore for aluminum, or the reason that amethyst is purple is because it has iron in it. So, or hematite is red because of iron. So you'll need to know things like that, but you do not need to memorize the periodic table. So yes, you'll need to know how elements affect rock and mineral composition, but nothing beyond that. Okay, is there a limitation on the number of students from each school who can take the open exam? No, so, but there can be a limit on the number of students that are accepted from that school. So the USC Esl does try to like kind of spread out where the campers are from. So if like 6 people from your school all make it into camp, they might not take all 6 students. So yeah. Okay, how many hours normally do you study each week to prepare for the exam? As I said, I'm probably an anomaly. I started studying when I was in 5th grade. So, um, uh, that's a really hard question to answer. It also depends on how easy kind of connecting things are, because it's not just memorization for earth science. So because a lot of the test questions that they ask you might be open-ended. So they're like, imagine that a volcano erupted or something. How do you think this will affect the local environment, climate, or something like that? So there's not really a correct answer. That what they look for is your logic, kind of, and your understanding of how the earth works together. And the faster you can kind of put it together and understand it, the better. And obviously that's a little different for everyone. And it's also hard to say, because another important part, as I mentioned earlier, is rock and mineral ID. So if I show someone a picture of a rock or a mineral, different people notice different things. Some people notice the shape, some people notice the color. So it's all dependent on how easy you find it to learn these things. But I would generally say, um, I don't know, just half an hour every day or 15 minutes every day. Learning biology or chemistry helpful for this exam? No, I would say no. Yeah. Actually, geochemistry is helpful, but it is a very small part of camp, and it is incredibly hard to learn. Like to this day, I still do not understand it. So I would recommend putting your time into solidifying your knowledge in other things, like IDing rocks, for example, or just understanding how the earth works together. Yeah, sorry, that was probably not a very helpful answer. Oh, and also getting earth science resources, because I know a lot of people do read textbooks, and the thing is that textbooks are pretty expensive. So there are definitely things like LibGen. Wait a minute. This is, I don't know. It's called let me send that to everyone. I know a lot of people use something called Library Genesis, which is where you can get online PDFs of textbooks for free. It's technically it's not necessarily legal, but it's out there, and I know a lot of people that use it to get the textbooks so that they can study. Or you can also go on Amazon. I know a lot of Goodwills sell used textbooks for super cheap, and you can get them on Amazon that way if you like having like a physical book. But yeah, that's a downside to earth science, is that a lot of the resources are indeed textbooks. Yeah, so. Mhm. Oh, I guess like an off-brand way to study. One way I did it is I know this no lab part, right? At the international level, when you get into the, how do you say, the teamwork part of it, there's not necessarily a lab, but there is a field work section. So that's why if you go to in-person camp, they'll take you hiking in in the mountain or walking through a river, and you'll definitely do physical activity. So because you need to look at a rock and maybe tell how it formed or what happened to it a million years ago. So at the international test, there is a fieldwork portion where you need to get hands-on and you need to analyze rocks and things like that. So there's not necessarily a lab part, but there is like a hands-on component. Yes. Yeah. And back to off-brand studying. But if any of you guys have Instagram, there's a lot of people that's like post a lot of rocks, like rock collectors, and they'll post their collections. And like one way I studied for IDing rocks and minerals is just scrolling through Instagram, and I'll see a rock, and then before I look at the caption, I'll try to say what it is in my brain, and then I'll check myself because they usually tell you what it is in the comments. So if you just do like 5 minutes of it every day, if you do it for like, I don't know, 1 or 2 years or half a year or anything, you'll have a pretty good library um, of minerals in your head. And another reason why I think that is important is because if you only study with Google images, it can be kind of harmful because all the images that you use, that you see on Google, are very like perfect. They're like museum quality minerals, and in real life that usually doesn't exist. So yeah, Instagram is kind of helpful. By the way, what dates are the training camps for competitions like these, including other Olympiads? Oh, okay, yeah. So actually, um, the test for earth science is usually in April, May, and then the training camp is usually in early July. And this is also another thing, is that there are usually conflicts with these times, because I know someone who um, could not come to earth science camp because they went to biology camp and things like that. So if you happen to be studying for 2 Olympiads at a time, I would suggest figuring out how you're going to prioritize that. But yes, early July, and then the team selection happens, and then you'll have like a month of prepping where the past Olympiaders, past team members will prepare you, and then you go to the international Olympiad sometime in August. And how long is the open exam? When I took it, it was 3 hours. It is a very long exam, and it's multiple choice. And then at the end, they make you write some questions, and then you mail it in. So after you take it with your teacher, you put it in an envelope, and they have like a seal and everything, and then you just mail it in. And then after I think 2 weeks, they'll email you back if you made it. So if you made it onto the camp and you're going to camp, they'll email you back. What else is there to know? Oh, is there an age thing? The youngest is freshman year high school. After freshman year, so after you're in 9th grade and you're going into 10th grade that summer, you can join camp. Yeah. So, and also it's just I wouldn't recommend trying to take the exam when you're in 8th grade or in middle school, because there's probably a lot more you can learn and study more about. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I say YouTube is also a good resource because like sometimes uh studying earth science, if you're just looking at like 2D things on a piece of paper, it's hard to visualize. So if you have trouble imagining like clouds or like circulation, YouTube, if you just like search up, it's like, I don't know, whatever you need help with, and they have like 3D imaging, that's also usually pretty helpful. Yeah. think that's it. Trying to think of any other past exams are the major resources as learning material. Yes, the thing is, past exams assume you already have a base knowledge. So if you look at the past exams, that's obviously not the only information you need to know. So I would recommend just like branching out and studying everything. Don't just look at a past exam and only study what's on the past exam, because if you do that, you're going to have like very advanced knowledge, and then your foundation is going to be kind of weak. So I definitely recommend just starting off with basics like plate tectonics, earthquakes, and just like the fundamentals of how the earth moves and things like that, before you get on to more advanced things like metamorphic facies, for example. What major do you plan on pursuing in college? So I plan on pursuing chemistry, and you might ask, well, Eva, if you really like earth science, why don't you decide to pursue that in college? And my answer to that is because, first of all, at UT Austin, you need to apply into a specific geoscience school in order to major in geology. And I was trying to, play my college admission strategy a little better. So I just applied for chemistry since it's a bigger school and perhaps a little easier to get into. But a bigger reason why I did not choose to pursue geology is because I know I really like it, right? And I like going on hikes and I like collecting rocks and all of that stuff. And I didn't want it to become a job. I was scared that if I learned geology and I would have to do it every day, it would kill my passion for it. So even though I'm majoring in chemistry, I still look forward to going on hikes, still potentially maybe doing earth science research, and just applying my chemistry background, because chemistry actually plays a very important role in like ocean circulation and ocean dynamics. So yeah, just keeping my passion for it alive by not not having it be a job, just having it be a passion. Yeah. So, yep. Any topics? Okay. So actually, I will probably um yeah. So or the Earth spheres, I will say right now. So I'll try to type it into the chat. But it's hydrosphere, which is like the ocean, river, lakes. Have you done any other Olympiad preparation? No. So um the Earth Science Olympiad. Actually, I have done Chem Olympiad prep, but I did not do it in the end. But the Earth is filled with the hydrosphere, so ocean, river, lakes. There's a cryosphere, which is like ice and glaciers. And then there's like obviously geosphere, which is like rocks, mountains, volcanoes, etc. And then there's a atmosphere, so it's a lot more than just rocks. So like clouds, weather, climate, yeah, and just like precipitation and winds are really important. So there's a lot to study. There's definitely a lot you need to know in preparation for this. And then what else is there? Atmo, and there's also I think anthro. So this is the human sphere. So in tandem to knowing things in the earth, like the clouds and everything, and the ocean and the rocks and everything, you also need to know, I think, a little bit about humans. So humans, human migration, how are humans affected by the earth, and how do humans create a lot of damage, and how do humans damage the earth? Oh, and I left out an important one, which is like the biosphere, right? Biosphere is just like animals and plants and how the earth interacts with living things. Because like if you think about like algae or like plankton, they live in the ocean and they actually produce a lot of oxygen for the earth. So let's just say if the ocean gets really hot and then it kills all of the algae, what's going to happen? So these are all things that you need to study for the Earth Science Olympiad. Yes. Oh, but yes, everyone that does Earth Science Olympiad are also extremely high achieving. So actually my teammate, his name is Will. He is made it onto the team for IFO. So it's International Physics Olympiad. He's on the team for that. He's also on the team for astronomy and astrophysics, and he's also on the team for Earth Science, and he's absolutely amazing. And a lot of these people that if you do Earth Science Olympiad are like crazy people that are super duper smart. Yeah, I was like, oh yeah, like I know people that, oh, also I know this is probably attractive to some of you guys, and I don't want to say this, but I will, is that a lot of people that get onto the team, as with other Olympiads, are very successful when they go to college. So what I mean by this is multiple people I know, I think 5 people are going to Stanford, 3 people are going to MIT. Yeah, so people that go through this are very motivated and very brilliant people. Yeah, so as you said before, it is very important to have a solid foundation first before diving into the advanced topics. What is a proper way to master the fundamentals before moving completely to the extremely much more sophisticated things? I think the number one thing is drawing yourself a lot of webs and asking yourself why a lot of times. So, and what I mean by that is, let's just say you just ask yourself a question. Let me try to think of a question. I can't even think of a question right now. Oh, like what created mountains, right? You can ask yourself that, and then you might be like, oh, plate collisions. So 2 continents crashed into each other and it created a mountain. And then you might ask, then why are the continents moving? And then you'll be like, they're moving because the structure of the earth allows that. So the mantle is liquid and the continents are just floating on top of this liquid so they can move around. And then you might ask yourself, oh, what's driving the heat inside of the earth? And then you might go on and make all these connections. So as long as you can answer your question and back it up, that is important. So just try not to memorize a lot of things is, I say, the key to foundations. So like, why are certain rocks stronger than other rocks? Why do certain rocks react to acid? Why are some like granite is really good, it's really strong, but like something like limestone is not very good. So that's why when people choose tombstones, they usually choose granite. They don't want to use limestone because limestone after 100 years becomes kind of, you can not see the words on it anymore. So, and then after you know that, you might ask yourself why, and then it'll lead you to Bowen's reaction series. And I'm probably saying a lot of this stuff and you have no idea what I'm saying, but what I mean by this is, you don't just memorize like granite is strong and limestone is weak. Don't memorize that. You need to know why, because of the elements inside the rock and why those elements make that rock stronger. So don't just memorize things, and know the reason behind why is key to, I think, a strong foundation. Is the USC Esl team well race diverse, or Asian centric like IMO team. Who? Let me think about that. My year had, let me see. Wait, now I need to, I think six people of the 8 were Chinese, and then 2 people were white. I think this year's team is a little bit more well balanced. I think there's a mix between like East Asian, so like Chinese, and like South Asian, Indian people, and some Caucasian people. And I think the gender balance is pretty good. Like my year was four guys and then 4 girls. This year's team is 5 guys and 3 girls. So like gender wise, it's usually like half and half or like a little bit off. But it's not necessarily Asian centric. No, there are definitely, but the thing is underrepresented minority. So in terms of like Black or Hispanic people, I honestly do not recommend. What do I mean? No, that was like such a bad word to use. I do not remember is what the word I was saying is, any like them being at camp. So I don't think I've seen anyone that was Black or Hispanic at camp, which is unfortunate. It's also something that we're trying to work on right now through education and outreach, but it's definitely a slow process. But that also brings up the fact that most people that get into camp are from California or tri-state area, and then maybe Texas. And then like in places like Oklahoma or Iowa or Nebraska, there's basically no one, which is also unfortunate. One person can be selected into the USA team multiple years. No. So if you're selected once, ideally you'll be able to compete that year, and then it's just time for the next group of people to go. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to compete because of COVID, and then this year's people will also be competing online, and next year's I think team is also competing online, and so it has to be next year's until you can go internationally, and you get to go to pretty cool places. Like one was in Vietnam, one was in France, in South Korea, Russia. I think this year was supposed to be in China, but that's not happening. Yeah, and you get to meet a lot of people. Oh, also, if you make it onto the team, I do not believe you have to pay for your plane ticket to the international event, but for camp you do have to pay. I'm not sure what the price is because it kind of changes every year, but yeah, camp does cost money. Yeah. Did you get any help from school teacher or from any club? Yeah, I definitely studied through Science Olympiad. As I said, I started studying really early, like 5th grade, and it's just because I really liked it. So I just studied for that, and then naturally I did Science Olympiad. And then it kind of just worked out for me. And so in terms of help from a school teacher, no. And even for Science Olympiad at Princeton High School, it was all just individual studying. So we did not have anyone to help us study. So it was all just individual studying on my part. But Science Olympiad definitely does help because you have your rule sheet. So if you look at rocks and minerals or geologic mapping or dynamic planet or fossils, if you just look at the rule sheet, it'll tell you things that you should study. And if you know that stuff, I think you are at a pretty good place to take the open exam. But also every year it is getting more and more competitive because I didn't have to take the open because I already made it on the team, but I looked at this year's open exam and it's definitely getting harder every year. So what might be good resources to study now might not be the case in the future. So I don't stop, just keep on studying. And yeah, is also a tip I have. Um, yeah, honestly, that's just my biggest belief is in just long-term studying. And what I mean by that is don't stress yourself out. Like don't, if you're somehow in fifth grade, don't start studying like an hour every single day because that's just super stressful. But if you just do a little bit every day, you gotta just like trust in the process and it'll take you places. Yeah. Yeah. Also, New York Regents. So I know the state of New York gives something called Regents exams, and they do have an Earth Science section. I think those, in addition to past exams, are really helpful. So if you want to take a look at the Regents exams from New York, the Earth Science section, those are also pretty good studying tool. Yeah. And obviously, if you have any more questions, you can definitely contact me. I'll put my email in the chat and yeah. Regional exams will give you oh no, the regional exam is just something that the state of New York happens. It's kind of like a standardized test that New York happens to give to its students, and those are just good resources. So New Jersey doesn't have like standardized earth science exams, but New York does. So the New York ones are helpful to study. To take the test, is it required to be on a SILE? No. Anyone anyone can take it. So if you wanted to take it like next year, you could. You don't have to be affiliated with any sort of thing. You just have to ask a teacher to proctor you for your exam, get them to sign it, and just mail in your test, and that's it. Yeah. But the fee, I think, is when I took it, it was $70. So it's definitely not super cheap. But the thing is, if you know like 3 people at your school are going to take it, you can split the cost that way. It's just mailing the test out takes 70. And it's also to, pay. So when you go to Vermont, they can rent out the university and everything. So since we are a small organization. Oh, yes. Do you have to be a US citizen and green card holder? Yes. In order to represent the US on the international level, you do have to be a US citizen. But to take the open exam, oddly enough, you do not have to be a US citizen. So if you hold another citizenship, you can take the open exam and make it to camp, but you have to be a US citizen to make it onto the team. And what time of year is this test? So the open exam that anyone can take is usually in April, May. And then you can just sign up on the website. Like right now, if you go to the website, it'll say registration is closed. You can sign up at the bottom. There's like an email list, and you can just put your email in. And then when the exam opens up and you can start registering, they'll send you an email. So you can sign up for it at the bottom. Yeah, but I guess like as a last word, since we have like 2 minutes left, is that please don't be deceived by the small amount of people taking the test. So it's only around like 200, a little more than, or maybe there's going to be more people next year, but compared to other Olympiads, there are very few people that take the Earth Science Olympiad. And I think a lot of people started doing, or what a lot of people thought this meant, was that they could just study a little or read half a textbook and they can make it into camp. But that is not necessarily the case, because as I said before, the people that are taking this exam and the people that are doing this are people that have gone out of their way specifically to learn earth science when it's not taught at school. Like, so the people that you're competing with are people that are very serious about what they want to do. So yes. To be clear, it it's okay to study all the fundamentals and some advanced stuff when you're preparing. Yeah, correct. So you definitely need to know advanced things. But why I recommend having a strong foundation is because you want to go far, right? I assume that if you want to go to camp, you also want to make it onto the team. And it is absolutely essential that you have a good foundation if you want to go far. Maybe if you just want to, I don't know, get into camp very quickly and just make it to camp short, you can cram and just know a few less things. But in the long run, it is highly beneficial for you to know your foundations. And yeah, so yeah, if you go onto the website, as I said, you will find Ben's guide. And Ben's guide, I'm pretty sure the first textbook on his guide is what a lot of people read to get into camp. Yeah. What is a recommended study hour per day? Okay, so someone asked that earlier, and my response to that was, it also depends on, I mean, how fast you want to get into camp too. So if you're in 6th grade and you have 3 years to study, then you don't need to do as much as someone that wants to maybe do it a little faster. And yeah, and that's also Science Olympiad. If you already do Science Olympiad, that puts you in a very different position than someone that has no Science Olympiad background. But I guess what most people do is they buy their textbook and then they look at the number of pages. So if it's like a 700-page book, and then you have like 350 days in a year, let's just say around that, then it means that you should read like 2 pages a day. Or if you want to read it in half a year, you just divide it. And I wouldn't say, oh, also another thing is setting goals. I don't think a study hour per day thing is very effective. So don't tell yourself to study for an hour, tell yourself to study to a topic. So I really want to understand how brine rejection works by the end of the day. I really want to understand what deep ocean circulation is. So don't limit yourself to just like an hour number, limit yourself to a topic and an understanding. I think is more helpful in the long run. And then give yourself a plan. So by the end of the month, I want to have this many things covered rather than an hour per day. I think is more effective. Yeah. Or like, I want to study and by the end of the week know 25 minerals, and then you can like quiz yourself on it. Things like that I think are more effective than an hourly basis thing. Yeah. And that's also connecting back. Also another really thing is connecting back. So once you learn something new, try to figure out how the thing that you learned connects to something you learned like a week ago, and then just build, keep on building. It's key. Yeah, I think that's it. If you guys have any more questions, you can definitely email me, or if you can't find Ben's guide and you tried looking for it, then I'll probably send you guys a PDF to whoever reaches out. And yeah.
Just one more question. When you said that after you mail your exam out, they will notify you if you make to the camp. Will they let you know your score even though you did not make the camp? Will they give you like, so every year you can see your progress, you're making nice progress, right? So like freshman year, I got like 60, and sophomore year, I got 70. So I'm improving. That will be like motivation for you to do more and then to make to the camp.
So the thing is, the open exam changes every year. It gets harder every year. So if you can technically get a worse score the second year, but still make it into camp, if that makes sense, because the cutoff is different, if that makes sense. Like every year the score cutoff changes. So even if you do like worse on the new exam, that's okay still. I think it's just important just to keep studying. Yeah.
Do they tell you what's the cutoff for each year?
Oh, what they do is actually they try not to do this anymore because then people get too competitive and they're like, oh, what did you get? What did you get? So usually they'll just tell you your rank. So like maybe they'll be like, congratulations, you ranked 27 and you made it into camp. But they won't give you anything beyond that number. Or sometimes they don't even tell you. Because I think they're stopping that because every year the campers get more nervous and more competitive and more like, I don't know, just antsy about their score. So I think my year was actually the last year where they told you what place you got. Now they just let you know that you were top 30 and that's it. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you everyone for coming to listen. I hope that was helpful and I hope that you guys pursue earth science. It's really fun. And yeah.